We will be called to order at 7 minutes after 2. Janie, are you taking the minutes?
Yes.
Excellent. So Janie will take the minutes. Our first item of business for the meeting today is the minutes of the previous meeting. One sec here. Great, good fun. Phone calls that look like they could be important and then aren't. There should be a word for that. I'm sure the Germans have a word for that.
For what?
Phone calls that look like they could be important but then aren't.
Think about that.
Okay.
Telefonanrufen wichtig oder nicht?
Sounds a lot more complicated than it needed to be.
That's the whole point with putting these big larger concatenations of words together. They're pretty funny sometimes.
Come on. Try and get this thing to recognize that I have a flash drive. Just having so much fun with this device today.
Can you guys hear me?
We
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay.
Hi, John.
I'm on my phone, so
Hi, John, so am I.
yeah, okay.
I'm actually here for the sit test on the new chair.
Oh, good for you. What do you think of it?
It's nice, very nice. I like it a lot.
Okay, minutes. Kathy had sent these out earlier. I transferred them to a Word doc for easier posting and sharing. Any questions, comments on the minutes? Otherwise, I would look for a motion to approve.
Also move.
Second.
Motion from Janie, second from John. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. And
That was Friday.
Yeah.
we have, I think, as our big items for discussion today, that we are looking at updates on the Friends and on the PNC building and the museum. So Melissa, maybe you could get us started with an update related to our meeting this past weekend with the Friends.
I would like to. Hi, everybody. Thanks.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi. Hey, gang. Thanks for your time today. Eric, Kathy, Jillian, and I joined the Friends at their meeting on Saturday morning, and we were invited to kind of give a pitch to the entire group about our idea of merging with them. As you know, they've already had a little bit of exposure. Eileen shared some of our back and forth with the entire group. So we really just got to get right into it. We did a brief overview and then we started fielding questions. There are still some concerns. There were just some ideas that apparently are still kind of abstract to them that they asked about. There was nothing critical and there was nothing negative. So I think it was a strong showing and I think we should all be optimistic. And the meeting minutes from that Friends meeting suggest that they're interested in continuing the conversation. The primary concern, at least what I feel is the primary concern from the Friends, is what's going to happen to their day-to-day. How is this going to change how they currently do business? Are they going to need to take on more? So we spent a lot of time talking about that and how we might envision that. The overall theme was that we were flexible and that we were interested in working with them to find the most comfortable platform so that we could partner together. And they seem to appreciate that. And so I think we can look forward to another conversation. How about you guys, Jillian, Eric, and Kathy?
Yes.
Another conversation with them? I mean, we have to. So, I mean, we have to kind of nail down some of those details.
We have to, but I don't think, what I'm saying is they didn't shut us down in this meeting. It seems like they're open to the idea and interested in moving forward.
Yes.
Agree with that?
Mhm.
Great.
Yeah, I would say for the get-go, there was a very positive, there was to me almost a conclusion, a foregone conclusion with the friends that it was going to happen with several of them. The other ones asked questions which were very much from a beginning standpoint, which we would expect. But nothing, I didn't get any, oh, this isn't going to work kind of a thing. And I got a lot of positive. So, but it definitely, Jillian's right. It's going to take a lot of ironing out.
Yeah.
I think we need to, I personally think we really need to get this firm and decided and announced well before their letter. And even, I mean, I would love to announce it with the Stroh Room, just all going forward, all these positive things happening and just get the momentum from the get-go.
That's a good idea.
Well, they're part of the Stroh Room, right? So with
They
the
are,
fire-
they are
Yeah.
big part.
Eric,
okay.
how much of that information do you want in the newsletter? I mean, because your comment, your post that you gave me was about like pardon our desk, but we should probably add information about the Friends donation in there too.
That's a good point. We can add a line in there that, because I mentioned that there's going to be a fireplace. We can just add in that it's a fireplace donated by the Friends of the Library.
Okay.
Wait, can I interrupt? Are you talking about something for the upcoming newsletter?
Yeah, so especially even just the e-newsletter, we tend to put a service update. We didn't in the past, but with the pandemic, there always seems to be something to update on. So we're putting a little quick statement about the fact that there's stuff happening in that space.
I would make it more than a one-liner. I think their donation is regardless of all this other stuff, it's a very, very significant contribution to a very significant improvement in the library. And I think we should give it its space and its accolades, along with it.
Well,
Both the stuff and this people have been asking for a fireplace in that library for as long as I've lived here. So we don't need, I think more than just a subtle little,
we can take a look. There are space limitations as far as how much we can include in the newsletter.
Yeah.
But we'll look at our options and opportunities for expanding on our gratitude.
yeah.
Certainly, I think we can do a
just-
nice lengthy blurb in the on the website and the e-newsletter where space is not as much of a
Excellent. Yes, definitely.
obstacle.
Eric, if you could take a look at that and then send me an edit, that would be awesome.
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay. So things are proceeding with the Friends.
But that's great.
And I
That's
think-
great. I think a lot of their reticence comes from just being naive about fundraising.
Well, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So just to put a fine point on this, I think as a steering committee, our next steps are to bang out a calendar, a suggested calendar, and what we would like to add to their program, and put details to it. So if we want to start a little bit of a social media calendar, what would that look like? Like a Instagram post every Monday, and Melissa or Jillian would do that kind of thing. Those kinds of details.
How did you leave at the meeting? I mean, what's the next step?
Um,
Eileen suggested that she well, we kind of, it almost was like wrapped it up and this is the way we're going to be. And then Eileen said, well, I'd like to speak to the membership, and there are some people who aren't here, and
Okay.
someone had left, Lynn Miller had left. So yeah, Eileen sort of demurred to let us wrap it up. And she's been real good about corresponding with me. So I suspect I'll hear from her shortly.
Well, we probably should wait till you hear from her before we, jump the gun, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
But I
Kathy,
think,
are you? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, whatever we do, and I wouldn't overwhelm them with it. I would be cautious, but I think
Right.
better prepared we are to steer them into this, the better, because direction won't come from them. But it's almost like they don't know what to do.
Right. This is
But they-
like a toe in the
they don't-
water.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So it'd be really nice if Melissa could say, oh, well, I happen to have some thoughts here. And then, we got the details ready to go. So that kind of thing.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking. Just an outline of what this new platform might look like. Nothing's written in stone and nothing overwhelming, nothing about the database yet, but just an idea of how we might begin. Kathy, are you under the impression that a vote is going to take place?
I would be surprised.
Okay.
Yes,
They-
You'd be surprised that it would or wouldn't.
I'm sorry, I wouldn't be, I would expect it to. They're pretty
Yeah,
much,
yeah, I would expect them to have, because
Yeah.
this is a change to their structure of their
Okay.
organization, so they're gonna have to vote.
yeah,
Okay.
and
So that's still to come.
so they
Yeah.
would need their mission. So there's actually a lot for them to do that they've got to
Yeah.
iron out.
Okay.
I would second or third that I think we're not up yet to putting together the calendar. They might not vote right away, but if they don't, it would, I think, only be because they were looking for more details on what they were voting on.
Okay.
Specifically that they would want to get the get the details related to the organizational setup
Yes.
ironed out. I think right now, if we were going to work on anything, it would probably be looking at what we can put forward as far as suggestions for how things would be organized.
Yeah.
How things would mesh, and et cetera, with all of that, because I think that's likely to be the next step here.
Right.
We are kind of waiting for them to get back to us to say, yeah, let's sit down and work on this and hash out what it's going to look like. After the meeting on Saturday, I'm very confident we're going to get to that. We're getting there. I would be very, very surprised if they came back to us at this point and said, like, no.
Right.
We seemed pretty much agreed, I felt, at the end of that meeting, us and
Okay.
the friends. And, Eileen is always very mindful of providing everybody with an opportunity to weigh in.
Okay.
And
Something that,
one last thought on the Instagram, and Melissa and Jillian and Eric, I mean, all of you, this is just, I can look at this through a generational lens, and I don't think the average friend gives a hoot about whether or not it's on Instagram, and that actually might, that plus the database stuff might just scare them off. So I would think more what we can do right now to help them make this transition in a very smooth and kind of I don't know, non-technology threatening way that everybody at that table would have understood. The lovely lady to my left, whose name I don't know, was really lost in the conversation. So just too much too soon could, kind of sort of tips the balance sometimes. So we want to be careful about that.
I appreciate that. I understand what you're saying. I think that's a good idea to start slow and basic,
Yeah.
but if we can accomplish slow and basic, we're going to have to move, in that direction. That is what we will have to, I will push back. I will make
Yeah,
it as painless as possible, though.
No, I fully agree with you. And I think the time will come not too far away where all that will be done and none of them will even, some of them will not even notice that it's a
Right.
thing. And,
Yes.
and but that's the way it should be. It should be, when everything's running smoothly, you really don't know what all the little cogs are that are doing their jobs that are doing. So I think you're on the sure.
Okay, that sounds great.
Something I'd like us to consider asking them to do is meet more regularly. I mean, they had started meeting quarterly because they didn't have as much to do, but this is going to end up being something where we need their feedback on a more regular basis.
Mm.
Jillian, I think
Well-
that committee that they're talking about.
Yeah. And that's probably going to be a real upcoming challenge because even in the before times, they were in the habit of not meeting in the summer.
That's right.
True.
Maybe they could assign a couple or 2 or 3 members that would be kind of a task force for
Yeah.
philanthropy that could meet, more regularly without convening the whole board.
Yes.
That would be ideal because that would allow things to just move along with the input of the friends and with their direction, and without bothering. They're all too busy, they think. So then they meet quarterly or whenever, and then they get a report from their own folks, and it sounds great, and it keeps moving along. I think a committee is the way. It was their idea. For starters, it was their idea. Feeding into their idea is complementary. So if we use that, evolve it in a way that works well, that might be the best direction.
Okay, I have
Yeah.
a question here. What kind of time pressure are we under? When is it that they usually put out their letter requesting donations? It's usually sometime in the fall, isn't it?
They start working on it like now-ish.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
They start talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Observationally, they rarely have that letter done before October.
Okay, so realistically speaking, we aren't up against like a June deadline or anything like that. We have a little bit more
No.
time than that. Okay.
Claire did sort of saying offhandedly and looked at Melissa and said, maybe Melissa could write the letter for us, which I think would be wonderful. That really is handing the whole process over. Because I don't know who did it, but it sounded like whoever did it last year isn't going to do it. I didn't know all the names going back and forth.
I think it was Claire.
Claire-
Well, there you go.
Claire did not last year. No, Claire, it was not Claire. It
Oh, it
was
wasn't.
Megan. It was Megan
Oh,
Pasikowski.
Megan. Yes.
Oh, Megan's a
Oh.
good writer.
She's a really strong writer, but I believe she's taken a full-time job. And so
Yep.
I don't know if it doesn't fit into her schedule or she's not interested in it. But I like the idea of, and I spoke with Megan a lot in the fall, and that letter was not written until November. And they're still talking about, I don't know, a lot of things that they wanted to put in the letter, including our request to clarify the 2 entities, which they declined. But
Right.
the letter was still being finalized in November. I think it went out either at the end of November or even very early December. But it was a lot later than I thought. I thought that letter was finalized by October 1st, and in fact, it is not. It is not. So if they're interested in letting me take a crack at it, that would serve us pretty well, I
I
think.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And I think they are. For many years, it was Eileen that did the letter every year, but she eventually, being when she really got into the president role, handed that off. And since then, it's kind of gotten kicked back and forth among the other members. So I think that would very much be welcomed because
All right.
That's
it doesn't
perfect.
regularly belong with a person right now. And I think the sense with the friends is that it's kind of a hot potato. Like, you do it. No, you do it. Somebody's got to do it. So no, good opportunity.
It's a hot potato Melissa wants.
I
Yep.
love those.
Well, and we've
What I-
got the party coming up too, so
Right.
we
I
are
would just-
doing some action items already.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Mhm.
Well, the more we can help them and, ease the pain here, the better.
Right. I agree.
Okay. So, anything else to say on the Friends? I do have an update on the museum
Let's have it.
activities. Okay. So we've now done an appraisal and a study, the environmental study for the building. The inspection, which was performed this morning. Both seem to have gone well. I was not there for the entirety of the inspection this morning, but the inspector did say that he thought that the roof on the PNC Bank building was likely due to be replaced, which, there was bound to be. It's a building sitting empty. There was bound to be something that fit in there. Probably more noteworthy was the chance that I had to sit down with Kathy O'Hara and Kathy McKechnie for a bit and get a chance to hear a bit about their evolving understanding of where they would like things to go on the museum's end. Specifically, they are now, it sounds like, leaning towards not having the museum continue under the library's umbrella, not having the library have ownership of the PNC building, but seeking to have the village have ownership of the PNC building instead and have that as the outcome, which I think would be a solution that would resolve a number of potential obstacles down the road, specifically the issues of maintenance. If it's a village building, the village, which has a sizable maintenance department for maintaining all these buildings that it already owns, would be responsible for that upkeep, as opposed to the library needing to plan out and budget for that upkeep.
Yeah.
And that's a big one from the village's perspective. Them owning that would also tidily make that a village parking lot, which of course there's great interest in. I have the village hears about that parking lot in the PNC Bank. Whenever parking gets discussed, the same way that we hear about that PNC building every time we talk to anybody about our space needs. So that would check a number of boxes there for the village as well. And from the museum's perspective, whether it's the village or the library, as long as it's owned by a governmental entity, they don't have to pay for any utilities, which is a wonderful thing, not paying for utilities. It is a big cost savings. So,
Eric?
Yeah.
If that were the projected outcome, would that allow for a campaign to raise money, a capital campaign to raise money to fund the purchase of the building that would be shared? I mean, it would be a joint effort by the village, the museum, and the library?
Yes.
Oh, I think that'd be a great outcome.
Yeah. And the one question that I did get as well was just kind of inquiring as to the library's level of what the library was planning to commit to an expected capital fundraising campaign. which I thought initially that they were asking, making an ask for like how much money we were going to give them. But as I talked to them, it was, I think, more of a concern that the library they don't want to be the ones doing all the work in a fundraising campaign, which, I think is probably a shared ambition. I know that we've talked as well that, in any partnership with the museum, that we want that to be a shared effort. And we also want to avoid any scenario where we end up being, the entity. So my takeaway on that one was that they are planning on putting substantial work into this if it goes forward. And they want to be sure that we will as well, which is fine because we will. So they don't need to have any concerns about that. I'm just glad to know that they're committed to it if it goes forward.
Amazing.
So that's good.
I have a duh question to ask here. I did not know that governmental buildings didn't have to pay utilities. I mean,
No.
somebody
Nope.
pays for utilities. Does that get, I don't get that.
Janie, have you ever driven by the schools and seen all the lights on all the time?
Oh,
That's
sure, yeah, but does that mean that, the
not.
utilities are provided?
Well, you and I are paying for them on our home bill.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Well, for the school, yes. For the library and the village, no, there's literally nobody pays for those. It's just gifted to us by the folks that provide the utilities. The reason being,
Really?
yeah, and that's
Eric-
a pretty standard arrangement because from the village's perspective, they own all the right of ways that the power and the gas move through. So it's an agreement
okay.
that's in place that they can do that, but then village doesn't get charged.
Gotcha.
So they're
Okay.
facilitating the power.
That has to, I knew there had to be some give and take there. I
Yeah.
mean, they're obviously
The
getting
school,
this.
I think, has a different setup, and I don't really follow how theirs works, but
But my point is that it's being produced and the production costs are being absorbed
Yeah.
in fashion that allows for all.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
how do we move Drew on this idea?
Oh, Drew is Drew reluctant?
well, I think having Kathy O'Hara involved assists her. The two of them worked very closely in recent years. So if having Kathy O'Hara persuaded in making the case, I think will go a long way towards moving Drew. And right now that seems to be the case. And Kathy, my sense of talking to Kathy O'Hara was that she has continued to talk and work on Drew already on this in terms of shaping, the best outcome for where we would have the museum moving into that space. So
Eric, could we just back up for a sec?
fire away.
So tell me what model Kathy was, I know this is just her, her takeaway, but what is the village would own, so the building would be the property of the village of Lake Bluff. It would be occupied by the library, by the museum and perhaps another village entity. It therefore would be maintained by the village, including the new roof kind of thing, or perhaps that would be part of the campaign. So the library would be free and clear of any
Obligations to the museum.
lease
Yes.
agreement or connections financially or contractually with the museum. It would be free and clear.
That would
Yes.
be a big win.
I'd be really excited.
Big
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the gist of it would be the too long didn't read version would be same agreement for the museum, long-term lease for a small amount of money, with someone else responsible for maintenance and oversight, but they would have that with the village instead of with the library.
Okay,
Here, here.
Basically take a contract.
yeah.
And then that would, the result of that and for the library would result in vacancy of the, what we now call the museum space. To be
Yes,
totally absorbed by the library and supported by the library.
yes.
And
we
then
can
with
always
the,
refer to that as the wood building too, if that's
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah,
it would be, okay,
Yes.
the wood building. So
Yeah.
then the fundraising campaign that they're asking about our participation in, that would be
Yeah.
to raise X amount of dollars to purchase the building and also prepare the wood building for occupation by the library.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay,
that was something I think that was one of the big takeaways from that first discussion that we had, and I haven't heard anything that would alter that
Yeah.
expectation that,
yeah, that included the prep needed by the library, that original Steve Prowse. Well, that's, well, I don't know how much, what the price tag of that is, but it sounds like a good deal for everybody, including, I think, for
Yep.
the village. I think they'll get a lot of pats
Yeah.
on their back and a ton of parking.
well, and I think, having the library and the museum at on the east end of downtown will have a lot of potential to really make for, really a wonderful downtown space.
Yeah, if I could just interject a comment that Ruth Schnell, who is a friend, made at Saturday's Friends meeting with absolutely no prompt from anyone. She just said, well, why don't we just solve all the problems and buy the building across the street, and the museum, move over there, blah, 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 blah. And then, we'd be fundraising. I mean, she just blurted the whole thing out and said she would stand on street corners and tell people to give money for it.
Yeah.
gotta love Ruth.
And then a few other people said, the village would like, or we would like that. And then somebody else, Missy Romanoff, said there'd be no more arguments about three-story. I mean, they all chimed in,
Right.
which I found very interesting from our perspective to hear that group enthusiastically saying, yeah, why don't we do that? So I was really happy to hear that.
So
That's consistent with the outreach that I did in the fall. That
Yeah.
was the number one question.
Yep.
Why don't you just take over the space that the museum is occupying? It's your
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
So we're not suggesting anything that hasn't already been thought about. So
Right.
it's great to see the traction.
okay.
So-
So one item of concern that the museum did seem to have, that both Kathy's shared with me, was they seem to be concerned that the library would push to have, to also raise, as part of this campaign, funds for an expansion. That we would try to get that in there as a fundraising goal. And I kind of really laid out, that, well, we've got a lot of discussing to do on all of this to get everybody to come together. My general sense, is that I think, looking at this particular fundraising campaign, that the goal would be to keep it focused. That really we would be looking to move the museum and get that space set up. And that, I don't think we've specifically discussed as yet, but I think that probably makes the most sense.
Yes, I
Just
agree.
focus in on that.
Yeah.
Rather than, just start adding in the expansion and other things. I feel like, we risk getting into some of the territory where the Park District was a few years back with their first pool referendum, where part of the problem that they had in selling it was just that they included too much stuff, and it wasn't as pool focused as it ought to have been. So I did want to run that past everybody. That was kind of my sense, that we were really in a potential campaign, we would be focused in on that move.
From a marketing perspective, you wouldn't want to have that many things going at once.
Right.
No.
It's not good messaging.
No, it's not. Also, if we were to be able to acquire the wood building all to ourselves, that sort of negates our need for more space. There's our more space right there.
Yeah, it goes a long way towards meeting that need. Plus, I think if there is ever going to be then a building campaign, I think it changes the equation as far as how we look at that. You know, part of why we had formulated, I know, looking to the west was in part that, you know, lack of other options. You know,
Right.
and with, you know, the library being in the entirety of the building, well, maybe we do take a look if we want to at some point, you know, dig back into this
Down the road.
Down the road.
Yeah.
down the road, then maybe to the south makes more sense. Expanding in that direction, behind the wood building.
Well, especially if
Something
there's
that we
parking
had-
across the street.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
something that we had discussed a little bit, but with Sean and Joe, but which had gotten squashed pretty quickly because we didn't control that building. So it wouldn't be expanded space that we could use.
But it gives you an opportunity to reimagine.
Yeah.
Use of the library, you know,
Mhm.
and how it might evolve and change given that additional space.
Yeah.
Particularly that, I mean, that space is so adjacent to the front.
Mhm.
You know, you have a chance to think about how you might use that space just to the left as you come in. As anyway, you know, I think there's a whole lot of reimagining that can go on if you have use to that space.
And speaking on the reimagining, what I would like to get set up here would be, I think we need to do at least get started on our meetings as far as formulating what the likely possibilities with that space are, so that we can start framing what we would like to do there. That's going to be an important part of the sales pitch.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to throw in 2 points and help address your second. Again, I did a lot of listening at Saturday's Friends meeting, and Eileen, somewhere in the conversation, and she's always so diplomatic and kind, she said basically, so you guys were trying to raise $5 million 10 years or 7 years ago, and nothing ever came of that, and now you're trying to do this. And my takeaway was our reputation as fundraisers at the library is a little sullied in a small little town. So the quicker we can put behind us that expansion, because we have this wonderful opportunity to do what Melissa and everyone else has been told by the village they want to do. And our impediment as a library, the only impediment being the situation of the museum, it all kind of evolves into a whole new light of importance and significance to what we're trying to do here. So I think, you know, saying, gee, we don't even have to think about a westward expansion would have been a plan B at best. So we can put that behind us now because we have this ideal alternative, which we would have chosen first. So there's that.
Yeah.
Eric, to your point about getting together, I think we absolutely need to start talking because we really need to have some clue as to what this is going to cost. And having sat through all these meetings all these years, I think we made a little bit of a mistake when we talked about the youth services and we got together with, I guess, Joe and a designer, and everybody just put their, I would love to have this on the table, and they put it all into a package, which ended up costing $1.5 million. There was no second guess of that, you know, pulling it off. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to sit down and come up with pie in the sky ideas. I want to think about what can we really do with this to make our library a better place to meet our needs. I think we're on the cusp of hearing from the tech committee some very good feedback. I know you've been involved in that, Eric. You know, Bonnie and Matt talked about real, 21st century stuff going on in small meetings and all that you mentioned. So I think we really need to say, what do we need to move ahead to be a 21st century library, to use our space, to do it well, to do it efficiently, and to do it for as reasonably affordable as possible. So that's my thought on that.
Along those lines, do you mind sharing with us what the appraisal came out to be for the building and the property?
We don't have the number yet.
Ah,
We haven't gotten that back yet.
Kathy
I think in
told me that-
terms of looking at the move to with this plan, that we would have the benefit that working with youth services, I think our goal was really to try and create a lot of excitement around the possible changes. We would not have to work to that with this plan, because just the notion of having the museum over there in that space, that's the hook. That's the big excitement. We don't have to come up with, we want to come up with our best possible version for the space, because that's, what we should do, but we don't have to come up with something that's like going to just wow people on its own, because it's not going to be the big sell.
I would
for this.
agree completely.
And that's probably to our benefit.
Yeah, because it's time to nail things down. Too.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty big wow in and of itself. I mean,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I think the community is tired of that building. In
Yeah,
general,
yeah.
and it being.
Yes.
I just think, yeah, and especially the people in that neighborhood, all the people who were so vocal on the no 3-on-3, I think just having its fate decided in a way that is going to be beneficial to all involved.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
And you
I like
have
to
it.
think, I like to think of the Block 3 no 3-on-3 group as our future potential donors.
That's
John
a
interrupted you.
thought. That's a great thought.
You have a
I like
chance
what you think,
to
Eric.
rebrand. You have a chance to rebrand.
Yeah.
That whole section of Scranton, in kind of an umbrella, which would include the museum and the library.
It's
new
a
brand.
huge
Yeah.
revitalization.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it would be a transformative change, not just for the two organizations involved, but for the entire downtown.
Yes.
Right.
It would go from being the kind of a void in the downtown area to being
A hub.
something really special, a hub. Yeah.
Yep.
Janie, Kathy McKechnie had told me that the Johnson's building, just the rehab center right there on Scranton,
Yes.
that building has been sold. And
Oh, it
is-
has been.
Yeah, and it's
I did not
under-
know that.
Is that the
it's under
U-shape?
contract at least, and it is comparable square footage, and it went in the 700s. So she was thinking that based on that, the property, the PNC building is significantly overpriced.
I mean, we
Well,
could've
there's
guessed
a
that.
lot more land associated with it. That's, we're talking about the
Yeah.
parking lot and everything.
Yeah, you're right.
too.
She was
So,
comparing square
so-
footage of, yeah, you're right. But Steve Krause had actually tossed in the idea when we walked through it the first time that the village buy the land because of the parking potential and then separate the building. So there's a lot of ways to look at it, I guess.
No, we're North Shore Spine and Sports. Yes, that's.
Got it, next.
It's all positive.
Smaller.
So
I've never been
Kathy,
on this bit of that building, so I don't-
what do you think that our first meeting here, as far as discussing the possibilities for that space, should be? Would that be a building and grounds committee meeting? Would that be a initial quasi meeting? Do we want to get Joe and Sean involved? It would seem likely that in terms of getting numbers for the work that we would want to do there, that we would want to get an architect pulled in at some point so that we could get those pegged to raise towards.
Yeah, I would really like to get a number, but I would like to not have to pay for it. So how do we do that?
That's a good
I
question.
hope that's possible, Kathy.
Well, you know what? We've spent an awful lot of money on this thing so far. So,
Yeah,
well, let's just be forthright. And actually, I would prefer to see Joe than Sean, personally. I think, Janie, if we had building and grounds, I mean, Bonnie's been on all the tours for tech. I really want to hear from them. And you and
I
Eric and
can-
I and whoever else we think we should be there, but I think we should keep it small and just, Joe has got, I went through, I've still got that whole packet on the space study and all that. I mean, somebody walked through or eyeballed that space earlier. So if we could just, I know the numbers are never that accurate, but we have to know. I mean, if we're going to enter into a fundraising campaign,
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I mean, frankly, I mean, Kathy O'Hara she's going to promote her cause first and foremost. And if anybody
Yeah.
comes up short, it's not going to be her cause. So
Yeah.
We have to be sure that our interests are very carefully, stated and realistic. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a big empty room. So
yeah, there'll probably be at least a couple points here where we'll need to be sure that we forcefully champion our own interests.
forcefully, right.
Yeah.
If
So I
there's,
guess I was just say if we could, I don't know how accessible Joe is anymore because he's moved up in his
Yeah.
profession. But if he's amenable to discussing this, he seems to always get more psyched about it than Sean does.
Yeah.
But we need someone who can say, yeah, you can do this. This is what we've got a new roof. We know about the HVAC. I really don't know what else there is to be worried about.
Yeah, I think Sean is more the engineering guy. I think like the roof project is the stuff that really gets him fired up rather than the design. I will reach out to Joe and see if there would be an opportunity for us to meet and talk with him sometime first week in May.
Great.
First or second week in May.
Yeah.
if
And
there's opportunity for staff involvement in discussing the space next door, I'd really like to be involved.
I would thank you for saying that because that was, I was gonna interject that with the group. I think the staff definitely needs to have, serious input into how you feel that space could be used. I don't want to jump the gun.
Yeah.
That's the only thing, it's looking more doable than it ever has looked. But I don't want to jump the gun. But that being said, I think to have some ballpark figures as to what we would have to do to that space to reconfigure it so it's all one space needs to be done.
But besides the workflow experience, Anna, Katie, and Jillian have all been tied in with all of the technology committee visits and discussion.
Oh, good.
So they've been part and parcel with that. We did have a really good technology committee meeting actually just last night where we went through and really pegged down a list of items that we had seen that we felt had some degree of possible use for the library and prioritize and assign those to folks to do more research on them or to work on them. So I can look at getting your Gmail account, the permissions to take a look at that document if you'd be interested, Kathy.
I'd love it. Thank you.
Okay.
And at the same time, without downloading another encyclopedia, I found it worthwhile to revisit the space study and see what
I
did
was
we
just
really.
gonna mention that, Kathy,
Yeah.
that I would love to look at that. I mean, that was done right as I was coming on the board, so I never really got a good look at that. I'd love to see what they felt about that space, see what the insights were.
They talked about I think John alluded to it, doing something with the alcove or whatever you call it, the entranceway, to tie it together. So yeah, I mean, I think we just got a little distracted with trees on the ceiling and this and that and everything else, and which is all appropriate for the time and space, but I think we just want, what can we really do to make this a very useful, very cool place that the town is going to love,
Right.
We probably should not completely lose sight of the needs in the youth services, though.
No,
too.
I'm not saying that we
It
should.
doesn't have to be, no, and I'm not saying that you were. I'm just kind of circling around to it, and it doesn't have to be executing that specific plan. But there
It
were
needs
good
updates.
elements in there, and elements that I think that we can continue to push forward. And at minimum, we don't want that space to continue to be dominated by furniture from the late 90s. It's not a good
By no
look.
means.
It wasn't a
By no
good look at the
means.
time. It's not a good look now. Okay, so I will reach out to Joe about his availability sometime early May, and look towards getting a discussion set up with him as a building and grounds committee with some select staff involvement to provide input as far as needs and capabilities, and as well as input as far as what has been observed at other libraries in the area as some great options that we might incorporate. So I will get that going.
Yeah, Eric, did Kathy O'Hara or Kathy indicate what the next step is from the village museum discussion was?
It wasn't explicitly said, but I got the sense that they were starting to dig in as far as what it would look like being in that space, and formulating how they would fit in that space, what they would do with the various parts of that.
The museum board is
and-
meeting this evening, so I'm sure that will be on the
Yeah.
agenda. I could pull up the agenda. Actually, Kathy sent it to me.
Yeah, and I think probably the biggest thing that Kathy O'Hara is working on right now is Drew.
Yeah.
And pushing that boulder upwards. So
I'm excited for their programming opportunities.
and
Is
we,
did she, did she sug-
without this lease, we are going to get along. I predict that we will get along so much better with the museum without this lease between us.
Oh,
I'm really
You
excited.
think?
I'm really
You
excited.
will. We'll get along so much better. Kathy.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I don't mean to harp on this, but are they talking about, or maybe they don't know what they're talking about at this point, but would the thought be that the village would out and out buy this building in the short term? Or are we talking about fundraising with 3 groups towards a goal of purchasing the building?
Second one.
That's
Okay.
what I'm-
So my question
She-
for John is,
Mhm.
how do you approach that in the short term when you've got something picked out that you love to go after, but you just sit and keep your fingers crossed, or what?
Well, it depends on whether, a lot depends on the timing and whether there's a possibility, and I'm guessing there may not be, of bridge financing. But usually if you're doing a campaign, you're looking at probably 3 years,
Okay.
That's a short one, actually. A lot of 5 to 7 years.
Mm.
And given the status of our donor base at the moment, 3 years would probably be ambitious. But sometimes organizations can get some bridge financing and start building, or pull the trigger, and then the funds, the raise catch up with the financing. But I don't know if that's an option here. A lot depends on how the contract is, what the cost is going to be, how it's structured, whether we've got any lead gift candidates. I think having the museum be part, and the village, I think part of the secret here, I'm just blue skying here, is being able to rebrand the whole thing as a village museum library project rather than just a library project.
It is 100%.
That
The way that the
opens-
museum,
that opens up the whole village as possible. And everybody wants to see something happen with that building there. So it would just be, I think, a huge positive and give us the opportunity to really have an exciting campaign to finish off that end of Scranton for the village and for the library and for the museum. But, you know, if you sign a contract for $1 million or $1.2 million and they need the money right away, you're not going to have a campaign that's going to raise the money right away. So
Right.
a lot depends on how the contract's structured.
Yep.
You know, sometimes you have a contract that you know, you have a lease with an option to buy or something like that, where you've got a little bit of wiggle room to raise the money. So the devil's in the details, but a lot
Gotcha.
depends on what the seller is going. You know, I'm not sure how many options the seller has, the owner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
You know, they are looking to lease it. The lease with an option to buy might be really appealing for them, and that might work well for us. Probably the biggest thing for us is just the being able to swing the finances on this is where the village is going to come in big time. Not because they're likely to, you know, be big donors. They're not. But, you know, in terms of all those financing tools, that all goes through the village.
Yeah.
So, you know, all of our options other than, you know, straight out writing ginormous checks, really, we're going to need their assistance working with the finances on that.
Yeah. I mean, given the capacity in the village, $1 million or $1.5 million is
Yeah, it's nothing.
small potatoes, but you know,
Yeah.
we're starting from ground zero. So
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I've thought since the first day we talked about this, I've never understood why the village didn't support the library, but without that, it just was, you know, people would look around with their shoulders and say, well, the village isn't doing anything.
Yeah.
Why should I be giving money to the library? So this could be exactly what we need, and we've needed
Yeah.
all along. So
Agree.
it's very
Yeah.
exciting.
Agree.
Yeah. I think the excitement on this is probably sufficient that we wouldn't even really need to push the village as far as like, you got to get in on this. We would like them to, but I feel strongly this is going to be a high excitement campaign opportunity as well. Okay, so we've got some next items laid out. Is one of the other next items for the museum side of things, I am going to get set up another meeting of our museum library initial work group, Kathy, for about a week and a half, 2 weeks out.
Oh, you're talking about Steve, Kathy, you and Kathy. That group is
Lots of Kathy.
Yep.
okay. I wasn't sure what.
The three Kathys plus Steve and I.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Um,
Just let me know.
And that would be kind of, I think, probably focus on really taking a look at what we heard back on the appraisal and the appraisal and the inspection.
Right.
And I think we're probably with that group looking towards getting close to the point where we would be starting to look at morphing that committee into something beyond its current ad hoc work group nature if we continue forward, which seems likely.
Yeah.
So look for an email on that, which will be very exciting. And anything else that we need to cover here for campaign planning today?
Yeah, I have two questions from Melissa. One question really. Have you had any progress on corporate donors that you were beginning to solicit? Hello?
Melissa, if you're talking, you're muted. Maybe she had to step away.
Maybe, yeah. Okay, well, I'll ask her another time. That's all I have.
What are our next steps with the, oh, Eric, you're muted.
Jillian, Janie,
Yes.
anything?
Just want a clarification on what our next steps are with the Friends and what we need to do on our end to help move that conversation along.
Well, Jillian, I think what the next step is Eileen will contact me. If she doesn't, I'm going to give it till Monday, which would have been a week, then I will follow up with her. She's been pretty good going back and forth with emails in a pretty timely fashion. So let's leave it up to her to respond. And I'm thinking she's meeting with her people this week. And then if not, I'll follow up with her and I'll copy all of you on Monday.
Okay, great.
And we can, Jillian, perhaps you and Melissa and I could, kick around some ideas as far as suggestions as far as workflow stuff.
I think that would be great. Yeah, at least just so we're prepared if they do have questions.
And by workflow, I mean like bylaw stuff, like how two organizations will fit together.
Sounds great.
Something that just struck me, another comment from the meeting that I took in was Claire asked about, basically, I think she was trying to ferret out that her impression was that the foundation was the board of trustees and that, so the Friends weren't being taken over by the board of trustees.
Oh,
She
dear.
asked exactly who was on the foundation. And I explained that it was Eric, Cal, myself. So there's only one board member on the foundation and the board. And that seemed to be a big relief to her. So I don't know, with that in mind, forming committees and subcommittees, I mean, I'm happy to continue to represent all these organizations. God bless you, I think.
Thank you.
But there seemed to be a discomfort that it was a board initiative to merge, and somehow the board, I'm not quite sure where it was, but it certainly seemed they did not want it to be board heavy.
I hope you disabuse them of that notion.
As soon as I said only one person on the foundation was on the board, they were like, oh, okay, fine. Well, one thing I thought, maybe they thought our board was like 25 people. I don't know. They weren't particularly well informed at all.
Right.
Okay. Anything else to cover? Otherwise, I think we've run through our allotted time here.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we don't have any other questions or subjects for discussion, then I would look for a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
A second. We all second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.